Hello everyone, this is Andrew, and today's video is all about this beautiful 30-gallon heavily planted aquarium. It's currently the home of 14 blue eye rainbowfish, a colony of red cherry shrimp, a couple of Amano shrimps, lots of Ramshorn snails, and one tiny little nerite snail. I've taken a lot of footage of this tank over the last 3.5 months, so I'm going to narrate over it and show the types of images that I get to enjoy every day. This tank actually sat up in my Indianapolis attic for 23 years before I brought it down to keep some of my growing baby Ranchu goldfish in. So this is footage from 3.5 months ago when I first set up this tank. I did debate getting 3 40-gallon aquariums, but since I had this tank, I figured I'll go ahead and use it. And I gotta say, I really love this little 7-inch shelf I have on this table. It's very convenient. As you can see, those are the compost that I put into this aquarium. I wanted to have a very deep, very natural kind of bottom for this tank, so I did 2 full inches of this dirt. And as you can tell from the way I have been shooting it, yes, I love using dirt for whatever reason in aquariums ever since I did my dirt planted goldfish tank 11 years ago. So there's 2 inches of this. There's about 3/4 inch of these clay balls. This is the Fluval stratum, I believe, clay balls, which is actually from a volcanic mountain in Japan. So I can say I have part of a Japanese volcano in my fish room. How cool is that, right? And on top of that, I have a kind of a lava rock, not from Japan, but it's still lava rock. I use this for the top part of it. And I love this 3 layers that you can see looking in through the glass. You can actually see little creatures, copepods and worms living down in it. You can see the roots going way down into the dirt. It's a very unexpected and very enjoyable thing I've had for this tank. I got all my plants for this tank from Aquarium Co-op. They have a warehouse in Lexington, Kentucky. So in Indianapolis, you put your order in and they come the next day. I got some sage, some little chaining plants. The big thing on the far left you can see is actually a tiger lotus, which will get really big. This is what the plants look like the first day they've been planted. You can see it's kind of cloudy still. I didn't want to do any really big hardscape in this tank. I have a little tiny piece of driftwood, which you can't quite see. It's not in there yet. And these are my first inhabitants. These are Amano shrimp that I got from Aquatic Arts here in Indianapolis. This is my first foray into having shrimp before. I'd had saltwater tanks in the past, and when you keep triggerfish, you can't keep these guys, little tasty invertebrates. So the Amano shrimp are very awesome. They do a good job cleaning up algae and little bits of food, and they're just busy little beavers all day long going about. And I'd never seen shrimp really swim around before. For me, shrimp are kind of the pink-white things you see on your plate when you're eating food. Now, as you can see, the plants melted back a bit the first couple of days, which is typical buying plants. And I noticed the Amano shrimp were kind of going at it right off the bat. And I just really love the way these guys just kind of float through the air, kind of like ghosts. And here's a little close-up of the initial planting. This is, you can see, not very heavily planted. My idea was to have the right side of the tank become very heavily overgrown. So we're going to have a jungle theme on the right side, and the left side I'm going to keep a little more clear. At this point, I hadn't quite decided exactly on everything, but one thing I noticed right off the bat when I got my red cherry shrimp, there's about 26 initially in here, is one of the females was very pregnant. You can see her little eggs down in there, and I learned a lot about cherry shrimp from doing this. You can see they're constantly moving those back legs, so there's a water flow going over the eggs so they don't get any kind of like mold or something growing on it. And this is one of my nerite snails and one of my smaller cherry shrimp that came on, who likes to go for a piggyback ride on Grandpa snail. This is one of my older snails, and you can see my rock pile that I put in the background. I really love how that rock pile turned out, by the way. So once my a couple of Amano shrimp and my cherry shrimp were in place, I got 14 of these blue eye rainbowfish. They're called, let me see if I remember, Pseudomugil luminatus, which literally means fake mullet. which is a terrible genus name, but what are you going to do? And these are kind of, I don't know if they actually technically are rainbow fish. They're kind of, I call them the pseudos, but they only get to be about 1.5 to 2 inches. So you can keep them with cherry shrimp, which you can't really do with larger rainbow fish. They'll kind of make a meal of them. Now, these guys can, of course, eat the smallest of the cherry shrimp. And when I didn't have these in here, I could actually see little copepods, little tiny organisms swimming around. I'd see little worms sometimes swimming in the water. But once these guys showed up, of course, those disappeared. I think you can actually see in this footage a couple little dots swimming around that he goes after, like right here, I think. And it looks like they jump away and get away this time, but it's kind of hard to tell. So the thing behind it, that is an Indian almond leaf. I started putting this in the tank a little bit at a time. They will slowly break down and create kind of a nice biofilm that the shrimp will eat on, especially the small little baby shrimps. And there's a good shot of my rock pile. And next to that, I put some moss. I got moss from a couple of my orders of the fish and shrimp. And I wanted to have a nice thick area of moss next to the rock pile, so hopefully little baby shrimps could hide from the predators. But, you know, when I saw this footage of these fish systematically going through every nook and cranny, I was kind of dubious if any of my little baby cherry shrimps would survive, and they actually have survived. That moss has gotten bigger. I have on the left there, you can barely see it, but there is a piece of driftwood underneath a little piece of metal that has moss on it. And this is my first experience using a food block. This is a food block with like calcium and algae and stuff I put in. And the bigger Amano shrimp in this tank and one of the very pregnant females jumped on it within like 10 seconds of putting it in the tank. And I love the way the Amano shrimp, you can see them just kind of like a buzz saw, putting little bits of the food up in the water, which of course makes the pseudos come down to have a look. And I really love the interaction these fish and shrimp have. There's like no really nipping of each other. There's no aggression. It's all a very peaceful thing. You'll sometimes see a little bumping and jousting, but never anything that's going to cause damage or too much stress for the fish. So it's a very peaceful environment for all this. This is a little bit later with the same thing. I debated on this tank whether or not I'm going to put an automatic feeder when I go out of town for say more than a week. I had always done that in the past. I always had a feeder dropping food twice a day. And there's a little bit of piggybacking on this. I think the red cherry shrimp just like to piggyback on other things. And so I think I'm going to not use feeders when I'm going to be gone for more than a week and just put maybe these kind of things in. And there's so much little creatures living in here, little copepods, little worms, that I don't think these fish are going to starve anytime soon. And all right, so here's a little bigger shot. You can see a couple days later, the fish do different kind of behaving. Sometimes they'll be up on the top together for a long time, and sometimes they kind of go for like a hunt, where they'll go down in between the grass. And as you can see, I've got a piece of broccoli in there. About every week or so, I'll blanch some broccoli or some zucchini or spinach, or cut up some carrots and put them in, and it becomes a magnet for the ramshorns in here and the shrimp. So you can see with the Indian almond leaf on the one side and the broccoli on the other, they just kind of get in and go to town on it. Now the thing about the Indian almond leaf is, as it starts to break down, it creates a kind of a biofilm on it that's very beneficial. The shrimp really seem to like it. Now, one issue I do kind of have with this tank is it is a prime ramshorn breeding environment. So I do have to periodically take some of them out, and I just plop them on either side of my aquarium in the 40 gallons. Since I have the full-size ranchus there, any small little ramshorns will be welcome. And if you look carefully, you can actually see a brine shrimp going around. I've been feeding these pseudos live brine shrimp every week, really, since I've gotten them. And it's kind of interesting to see. And I think they actually do eat some of the vegetable matter. I think little bits of that broccoli, I sometimes see them kind of eating them and they don't seem to spit it out. So They apparently are a variety eater. They'll eat obviously little small swimming things and little pieces of vegetable matter. They don't seem to mind it too much. And I just really love the way this aquarium, see, I love the way that the rock on top looks and the gravel underneath it. It just has this beautiful natural environment. And this is a typical scene you'll see on top of the sponge filter. There's a one double sponge filter in this tank. You can see a female there fanning her eggs, and there's basically always at least one or two on there. So this is the more surface area behavior you'll see the fish do. I've actually put some baby brine shrimp. So right now they're hurriedly going around trying to get their share of the baby brine shrimp. And it's really fun to watch. It's kind of hard to zoom in with my iPhone to get a clear shot of one of them moving around because they're so small. But it's probably a lot easier since this tank is only 1 foot wide than it would be for a 40-gallon. And here's kind of a little hold your camera over the phone and don't drop it shot. You can see the rock pile, which, have I said how much I love it? We have a nice crypt growing in the back on the left and another kind of crypt on the right. And you can see now, as time's gone by, the plants are starting to spread out. They make little babies underneath the ground, put them up, and eventually fill up the whole area. This place right in front here, I actually pull out any of the grass that comes up there because I want to have this little section in the front completely clear so I can put the Indian almond leaves there and I can see the fish. This is where I'll put the larger pieces of food. As you can see, there's a part of a broccoli still on the left and I think a zucchini on the right. And at this point, it's been over a month and a half probably. You can see there's more and more plants now getting thicker. Eventually, it's going to go all the way to the front and create this very dense jungle look. Still a little bit sparse right now. So one thing we had after a couple weeks are some baby cherry shrimp born in this aquarium. Kind of very excited. Never had shrimp before. And this one's on the bigger side now. He's probably to the point where he's safe from that predator. I have fed some frozen brine shrimp to my pseudos, and they can't eat it in one go, but they will shred it into little bits and eventually eat it. So if he were floating on the surface, he might be a goner. Oh, another thing I feed these shrimp are peas. I'll actually take the shells off a couple peas, mince them up, and give them to my goldfish, obviously, and to these tanks as well. And they all kind of lined up for this nice little shot. It's just really interesting seeing their little legs and arms going like crazy, getting little bits of the food. And the little bits that they miss will go down into the gravel down below. I call it gravel because I've always said gravel. Go down to the lava rocks and the clay down below. And all the little creatures that live down there will get their share of it. And yes, occasionally the fish comes in to say hello. And I don't know if they eat peas or not. I know my Blue Eye Rainbowfish will actually eat bits of peas when I put it in here. So here's, again, a typical day in my aquarium. You've got that beautiful rock pile. We've got a couple of the red cherry shrimps just eating little bits of the broccoli that's been falling apart. And it's just such a beautiful thing for me to see. It's so calming, it's so soothing. I just really enjoy spending time watching this tank. Although I do spend a lot of time sometimes zoomed in with my phone or even a magnifying glass because, yeah, these guys are pretty small. And you can see a beautiful Ramshorn snail there on the left going up on the side. So when I cull the snails I try to get just the more boring brown ones away and try to keep the more colorful varieties. So here is danger time for baby shrimp. If you were a baby shrimp and you lived in this rock pile, would you come out right now? Yeah, no, probably not. So this is the different look it has when there's not an Indian almond leaf. And these guys really think there is something to eat down here. So I don't know if they got one of the baby shrimps and the other ones saw it or heard it or what, but this is somewhat unusual of all of them coming down and so very specifically looking for something. So this is what happens when you put a little algae wafer in the aquarium. This is a broken up small piece of algae wafer. And as you can see, the shrimps absolutely love it. I think when they're tearing up little bits of it, the pseudos will actually eat a little bit of the algae wafer. I suppose it's good for them. And of course, it is a magnet for baby Ramshorn snails. And I think this is just, this is such beautiful footage. Just look at this. Look at those shrimp. Isn't that great? And I gotta say, this tank has really made me love raising cherry shrimp. I know some people have been in it for so long. I never got that bug before, but yeah, I really do have that bug now. It's just so amazing. And having these small fish that the shrimp are perfectly at ease with. They don't see any threat at all from these fish going around them. Fish are the same way, so they're all very good community fish. And I do have 3 Amano shrimp still in here. One's bigger than the other. This one eventually is going to become pregnant and become really big compared to the rest. And you can really see the difference in how it eats. It's got a little sharper, whatever you call their front leg parts. And they can actually just shave little pieces up. So you can see little pieces drifting up. And if you watch closely, you can see the pseudos eating them up, really enjoying it. So this is probably how I'm going to feed my fish when I leave. I'm just going to put a couple of these things in. And it's kind of interesting in these red cherry shrimp how different the amount of red coloration they have. So these all came from Aquarium, Aquatic Arts here in Indianapolis. And they're very different colors of how red they are. So this is now pretty good growth near the end. And you can see that kind of jungle look. You go in and all you can see are plants, 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 and then those little fish going behind. And just remember, if this had been in a 40-gallon tank, those fish would be another 6 inches back and you probably wouldn't be able to see them as much. But this is just a beautiful, beautiful jungle look to me. And you can see this is the tiger lily. It's got a lot of holes in the leaves. So it's hard to imagine that they're not getting enough nutrients from the soil, but apparently they do. But, you know, I'm fine with how this looks. The fact that it's these giant, overgrown monstrosities compared to these small fish, I think this looks really awesome. You can see we have a lot of duckweed in this tank. This aquarium is a very good duckweed growing tank. So about every day, I'll scoop some of the duckweed out. I'll put it in the aquariums on either side, and the goldfish eat it. So it's a great way, and I have to do less water changes in here because that duckweed's taking out a lot of the extra nutrients that the fish aren't doing. So if you go down an inch into the front of the glass, this is the world you see. All these tiny little worms, detritus worms, things I don't know the names of, little copepods. All these things are living in this aquarium all the time. You don't normally get to see. It'd be like if you could go down into an actual lake, into a river, and see this little thriving ecosystem. And this is why I wanted to have those 2 inches of dirt, all the clay, all the rocks on top. I think this is a fascinating thing. Some people probably will find it a little boring, so I'm not going to show too much more of this. I just wanted to show you this is what's going on every day inside my aquarium. So here is a beautiful lobster. Okay, it's not a lobster, but it might as well be. It's almost the same shape. It's just interesting seeing his little hands going through, cleaning things with a Ramshorn just kind of slowly doing his thing in the background. Yeah, I love shrimp. What can I say? And this is the same kind of shrimp, but you see how different the color is on that. It's got more of the translucent look to it, which is, I guess, part of shrimp breeding. You get varieties in the intensity of color. So this is about a day after adding a blanched zucchini. As you can see, the shrimp are all over it. The Ramshorns are all over it. And yeah, and I actually got my initial Ramshorn from 2 places. I got initially from Lucas, back when I thought LRB Aquatics still lived in Indianapolis. I ordered some shrimp from him, but they came from Florida. So unbeknownst to me, he had moved to Florida ever since then. And so I got a couple more from Aquarium or Aquatic Arts here in Indy. Now you can see my one nearite snail in this tank. I have one small spiked nearite snail on the right side. He was small enough that I was afraid my 6-year-old ranch ewes might actually eat them. So he is the sole nearite snail in this tank. I don't really like seeing their little snail eggs on all of my plants. So I only have my nearite snails now in my goldfish tanks, not in my heavily planted tanks. So this is I think this is a different kind of moss than the other one I initially bought. This is, I think, called a Christmas moss because it kind of looks like a Christmas tree. This little guy, I believe, is one of my brine shrimp. It looks like he's grown a little bit, and now he's down below about an inch, and he can't quite get up. So he's probably eventually became food for somebody. So here is one of my baby shrimp. Now I believe this shrimp, actually, the mother got pregnant and had her baby in my tank. So these are actually baby shrimp that are actually grown in my aquarium, and you can see the size difference. They are tiny little guys, but this one already has some red, already looks cute, and even though there's a big thing moving around him, he just busily goes about his thing, getting his little food on. I think they're so adorable. I do kind of wish I had gotten shrimp a long time ago. And of course, they grew up with Ramshorn, so they're used to just getting on top of the snail and just riding them around for a while. I assume that the shells of the Ramshorns do get a little bit of biofilm, some kind of edible matter to them, and if anything, they certainly keep all the snails nice and clean. On my nearites used to actually get algae on them and never got cleaned off. So here are some of the male pseudos, the Blue Eye Rainbowfish, doing a little bit of sparring. You can see the little pom-poms going off on the top. And one thing to note is my rainbow fish, they all have two dorsal fins. You can kind of see the two separations on top. My Ranchu goldfish have no dorsal fin. So on average, all of my fish have one dorsal fin, but none of my fish have one dorsal fin, if that makes sense. And you can see the one female there kind of waiting to see who's going to win this 3-male joust for the breeding rights, I guess. I haven't actually seen any breeding behavior yet. These are still growing. They were sold to me as adolescent blue-eyed rainbowfish. Once I do get some breeding behavior, we'll probably get a spawning mop and see what we can do. You can see the duckweed growing up there. So here's another typical day on the rock pile. We've got the Indian almond leaf. I probably replace these out about every week and a half. Once they really start disintegrating, I'll cut another one up, stick it in the water. It takes about 2 days or so before they'll sink on their own. And one thing I noticed about Amano shrimp is you can actually see what they've eaten in their bodies. So here is the Indian almond leaf doing one of the things it's advertised for. It provides a little hiding area for tiny baby shrimp. And that's exactly what it does. And here's what it looks like above. We've got the shrimps doing their thing above, little baby safely underway. And you can see to the left there, one of the disintegrated Indian almond leaves that I had before. And again, this beautiful rock pile that I love so much. And you can see a little bit of rapashi there on the left. I make rapashi, either once a week or every other week or so, just as for a variety for the food they get. So here's a typical configuration for this tank. The pseudos typically like this upper left side to swim around in, probably because that's where I'll put their food in. In addition to the live brine shrimp, I do decapsulated brine shrimp, where they just take the shells off it, so they get little bits like that. I'll put in a little bit of kind of crushed flake food, and that's where it typically goes in. And I'll spread a little bit throughout the tank so the shrimps can go and find it. So you can see my double sponge filter. I've had sponge filters for so long, they just seem normal to me. I think some people probably don't like the way they look, but they're fine with me, and they really are nice for the shrimp. The shrimp really do like to go and sit on them. So, as you can tell, I really love this 30-gallon, heavily planted tank, and I hope everyone enjoyed watching. I am Andrew, and as always, happy fish keeping.